aware that we are in tight surroundings. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. We are in the process of taking a number of briefs at the same time as we meet with the Cabinet of Barbados today. Because of the time constraints, I wanted to invite you because over the course of the next 2 or 3 days, there will be a series of engagements that we think it is important to share with the people of Barbados. I've asked Minister Ryan Strawn, the Attorney General, Ambassador Dr. Clyde Maskell, and Professor Prasad to join me at this stage because we believe that we have a duty to share with the country at really what is the first substantive cabinet meeting, what the state of affairs are with the country. We continue to have a tenuous state with respect to our foreign reserves, and in the circumstances, our foreign debt payments, as we indicated during the course of the other activities in the last few weeks, that we had a date with destiny. Our date with destiny starts from Tuesday with foreign debt payments between the 5th of June and the 18th of June, which represents a high point of foreign debt payments for us over the course of the month of June to the tune of $100 million. Similarly, we are equally aware that our foreign reserves are tenuous at a stage where international oil prices have already started to climb, and indeed last week reached a high of $80 in recent times per barrel, $80 per barrel, and we have only to hope that it does not move rapidly, but we cannot be a hostage to fortune. We have a state of affairs where our debt and our deficit are unacceptably high. Indeed, our debt represents the third highest in the world after Japan and Greece, and our deficit is unacceptably high because the government of Barbados that existed before the previous government was hoping on the basis of one-off sales of the Hilton and the Barbados National Terminals Companies Limited to be able to bring that deficit down. Of course, neither of those two sales came through, but even if they did, it would be an unsustainable reduction because it would be a one-off payment and it would be cosmetic, just as fate would have had it either on the eve of an election or post-election. Similarly, our ability to finance our deficit is compromised. We have talked for the last 4 or 5 years about the printing of money with the central bank. We recognize as well that with the 23 credit downgrades, we are literally boxed out of the international capital markets, and even if we were able to borrow, it would be at extraordinarily and horrendously high prices that would compromise the country. At the same time, at the domestic level, there has been little or no appetite in recent months for domestic government paper, largely because of the absence of confidence that existed prior to the election. What has compounded the situation since our coming into office with respect to our knowledge of it is that the brief which we have received suggests that government's arrears is in the vicinity of $1.7 billion as it stands at September 30th last year. And indeed, we will get only an update on this figure next Tuesday in terms of the management accounts, because today is the 31st of May, and we've asked for an updated May 31st figure of where these entities start. As of the 30th of September last year, outstanding wire transfers as per the Accountant General's records were $621.4 million. University of the West Indies, as per the last audit confirmation, was owed $229.7 million, and state-owned enterprises $467.7 million, bringing it to a total of $1.315 billion. And when we add to that approximately $345 million owed by the Barbados Revenue Authority, you see that we are on or about approximately $1.7 billion. The bottom line is that of those amounts, there are large and huge amounts owed by the statutory corporations as of the 30th of September. Mr. Holliday is with us, and just to give you an idea of the differences, on the 30th of September last year, the Barbados Water Authority owed out $55.52 million. Mr. Holliday has now advised us as of yesterday that the last figures he has as of last month, approximately $70 million. So when we tell you that even the figures that I have been supplied in the last week as of the 30th of September are insufficient for us to make appropriate decisions, you understand, simply with the presence of Mr. Holliday here, that over the course of since the 30th of September to now, the Barbados Water Authority has had literally an increase of over $15 million, which represents about a 27% increase in what it owes out. I need not tell you, therefore, what I'm likely to find at the Transport Board, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, the National Housing Corporation, the National Conservation Commission, the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. The figure that we have here is a paltry $10.2 million, but the Minister Mo has advised that the actual debt of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation is in excess of $125 million, so that these figures do not appropriately capture that. Sanitation Services Authority, the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc., it is a woeful state of affairs, and really and truly, anybody who presided over this really needs to answer to the country for what, in my view, is a dereliction of duty that is unparalleled since independence. With that state of affairs, we still have a problem with the South Coast Sewage Project. And we go back upstairs in Cabinet to deal with both the economic affairs matters, the economic situation, but also the situation with the South Coast Sewage Project. And I'm now being advised that there are issues with the Bridgetown Sewage Project, which Cabinet is now to be brought up to date with respect to failing equipment that is not holding at Bridgetown. We have the same woeful state of affairs with respect to the collection of garbage as a result of an absence of garbage trucks. In spite of those figures that I've just quoted, we have a woeful state of affairs with respect to the Transport Board, that in spite of the $86 million that it owes, there are no buses on the road to be able to pick up people and to transport people. This country is in need of serious, urgent action with respect to its economy and its government. With respect to what I've said, what worsens the situation for me is that the National Insurance Scheme is owed $459.1 million, and that represents the absence of contributions from the government of Barbados. It represents a failure to pay rent since 2016 for all of the buildings that the government of Barbados either occupies or has an obligation to pay for, like the CXC building, and it represents a failure to account for the reimbursement of non-contributory pensions for that period of time as well. This situation cannot be allowed to continue. And the bottom line is that what makes it worse is that we are now discovering, and we are nowhere near the bottom of discovering, the deeds that were done over the course of the last few months, particularly since Parliament dissolved, in the name of the government and with a consequential obligation upon the taxpayers of this country and the people of Barbados. If ever there was an occasion of a government picking the duck back bare, this was such an occasion. And the consequences, as we are now seeing, are devastating to the Barbados economy and to Barbados's economic stability. Nothing, however, will be allowed to daunt us. To give you an idea of some of the contracts that we're speaking about, in the course of the last few days, on the 18th of May, literally 6 days before the government of Barbados faced an election. A contract and a letter was signed with a company called Global Ports Holding PLC that would see them receiving a 30-year concession to operate the Barbados cruise pier for the paltry sum of $34 million US. And in exchange, they would have the Barbados Port Inc., pursuant to a concession agreement, assign its right to collect certain charges from the cruise lines directly, would go to Global Ports, and the government will receive instead a service fee pursuant to the service agreement, which we have not yet seen what that fee is, a percentage of the passenger and related charges, resulting in the Barbados Port receiving 1/6 of the current passenger charge and 1/5 of any increase in certain other agreed charges. Now, this has happened at the very same time that government under that minister put in court Barbadian investors and shareholders who operated the Bridgetown cruise terminals for over 2 decades, and so much so that an injunction was issued by the court indicating that they could no longer put those people out. But at the same time that was happening, and if you recall, at Oystons, on the same night at which I spoke about the sale of Barbados Hilton, I warned the country about the signature of this deal with Global Ports Inc. The financing arrangements with the financial company have not been fully put in place, and I've asked the Attorney General as well as the lawyers for the port to please advise as a matter of urgency, particularly since this contract seems to be tied to a Berth 6 contract, which the country has heard me speak about as far back as 2016, which started with the concrete piers being built in the port in advance of any contract being entered into by the Bridgetown port with the entity that was building the concrete piers in the port. Regrettably, on the 7th of May, a contract was signed, tax incentives were given by the Ministry of Finance to that company, a company literally called Berth 5 Projects Limited. Remember, I had indicated to the country that Berth 5 moved from 48 million to 63 million, a tremendous cost overrun of over 33%, and that same company was allowed to remain in the port, build concrete piers without the Port Authority issuing a contract, going to tender for a new contract for Berth 6. And now, on the 7th of May, in the middle of the campaign, that company was given access to tax concessions ranging from exemptions of payment of import duty and value-added tax for all supplies and equipment imported or purchased locally or used exclusively in connection with the project for a period of 22 months from the date of the commencement of the project when it starts. And similarly, that the price of that contract with Berth 6 was to be $145 million, which they were also to bring financing into the country for the construction of Berth 6. As I understand it, the financing for that project is contingent upon the numbers that would be given by Global Ports having this contract. Who are the same players? The same players that we expect to see all of the time. Today is not about calling people's names. Similarly, on the 23rd of May 2018, the day before elections, tax concessions were given to the Hyatt Hotel to Vision Developments Inc. A range of tax concessions once again: import duty, excise tax, and value-added tax on all supplies, motor vehicles, construction equipment and machinery, consumables, food, alcohol, and beverages. And I can go on and on. Perhaps the most egregious part of it is one that was for a Mercedes coupe to be given for, look at it here, on 12th of April, while Parliament no longer existed, 2018, a 2018 Mercedes-Benz AMG GLC 43 4MATIC Coupe to be used for the director of sales involved in the Hyatt Hotel. What makes this even more atrocious is the Barbados Tourism Investment Inc. has indicated to me that they are in possession of a check for the paltry sum of $5 million for the purchase of the Old Harbour Police Station, which one would have thought, given the discussion on the Hyatt for the last few years, that they would already have had adequate arrangements made for the land on which the hotel was to have been built, without a sum having been paid or to be paid on the eve of an election, and the sum that it is. I am not, and I have no, believe you me, no bias, nor does my government, against any person. And if investments are good for this country, given the state of the economy, we will do it. But I've asked for all of these things to be reviewed urgently, because, as we said in our manifesto, there must be a college of negotiators to ensure that there is the appropriate value for the people of Barbados, who have worked too hard, who are suffering too much, for the assets and benefits of the people of Barbados to be given away willy-nilly to people in circumstances where it cannot be justified, and in circumstances where we have no public transparency and accountability on these matters.